to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Torchwood episode, Combat, written by Noel Clarke. Noel Clarke, aka Mickey Smith. He wrote a Torchwood episode. That is awesome. That is one of my favourite facts in the entire franchise. Mickey Smith had written a story for Torchwood. And it's also directed by Andy Goddard, who also directed previously the Torchwood episode Countryside, which, as you might have remembered, was one story I really enjoyed. So I'm glad that he returned for this. And Noel Clarke! How is that not like the coolest thing ever? They should really bring him back to write an actual Doctor Who story. That would be quite interesting if you ask me. Anyway, this story continues on from the character development that we had with Owen in the previous episode, Out of Time. And here we deal with the aftermath, the fallout of that. And we also have Gwen coming to terms with her affair with Owen and trying to keep her personal life and her Torchwood life basically together, as this story has she has her own little plot of going on her own little thing, her own little adventure. The story also features the heavily prominent monsters of the Weevils, which have appeared throughout the series one. They're basically used as like the background monster, like I'm trying to think, not B-listers, not even C-list, Z-lister creatures. You know, they're not where the story is about them or anything, but they're rather than like a template. It's like, right, we need a monster at this moment where the Torchwood team can fight just for this one scene. We'll have the Weevils in it, and then and that's basically the Weevils plot element of the stories previously. But this is the first time they get a massive feature. So there's a lot to delve in. This is one episode which is highly loved by fans. It is heavily praised for its influences, its movement of the story arc of Owen, and delving into the character of Owen. So let's get into the story. It starts off essentially with the Torchwood team trying to capture down some Weevils, but it turns out there are actually another organisation of some sort, thugs, who are actually stealing and kidnapping Weevils, finding them throughout the city of Cardiff and taking them to unknown locations. And this is like with Jack, it's like, what the hell, where's... so it turns out we've got rivals, somebody's been kidnapping Weevils, and that is basically the setup of the plot. Now, what's interesting here in terms of its main plot is that the story breaks into two parts. We have basically the Owen basically grieving, and then when he gets into the more into the Weevil plot, the story takes a turn with him as it's about him basically getting into this community in which he can basically relieve his anger and his pain and his suffering, and he kind of relates to the villain. So that's a very interesting dynamic there. So let's talk about, of course, the first part. This story is mainly Owen-centric, like he is the main character. However, there is some kind of subplot with Gwen, which I'll get into halfway when we go into the second half of the story. So mainly the first half is about the Torchwood team figuring out like who are these people, what's going on. At one point, Toshika and Jack track the organization down to a warehouse, and when they go to it. Not only do they find it's abandoned, but they find a dead body. And when and on the dead body, there's a phone call. In a nice little fun little moment, they have the Crazy Frog music playing. Crazy Frog, for those of you who don't remember, was a fad of some sort. It's like probably one of like the most earliest memes. Is Crazy Frog a meme? Possibly. It's like an animated character that that makes like a ring ding 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 ram ba 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 kind of noises. I got the DS game of that. Sorry, I'm going on a complete tangent there, but anyway, Jack picks up the phone and on the other side it's like, whatever you're doing, stop it. We are going to stop because you'll get yourself hurt. Jack's just like, well, here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop you, and I'm going to come for you, and then I'm going to hurt you as well. And what's really interesting is that if this episode came out a few years later, this would have easily been inspired by that scene from Taken, where Liam Neeson picks up the phone and is like, I will find you, and I will kill you. But this came first. I mean, it is a kind of a common scene, but when Taken did it, it became like a huge things that, like, you get the intimidated scene in which they're on the phone and one of the characters like, I'm basically coming for you. Jack has that moment before Liam Neeson does I think it was 2008 the original Taken came out. Don't know. And whilst this is going on, Gwen and Owen basically are kind of bickering because of their relationships with the previous story. Owen is basically heart torn. He is more aggressive than he usually is. However, there is a not a justification, but there's an understanding here that it is because of the loss of Diana Holmes in the previous story, in which that influences. Which means that really the issue with that is that you can't watch this episode, this story on its own without knowing the predecessors of the storyline. Like, you can't watch this episode on its own. You've got to watch Out of Time first. Luckily, Out of Time is a great story, so it might be homework, but it's good homework. And Gwen, she kind of questions him after trying to find they identified the body. They go to his family to find out like he's dead and whether they have information. Turns out they know nothing about nothing. And Gwen is like, why are we doing this? Why are we still, thing? And Owen is like, okay then, we'll stop. I never really liked you anyway. And they kind of have this like massive argument where Gwen drives the van, the Humvee, on her own as Owen is forced to basically walk. And you can basically see the tension growing there, a massive tension. And then this is where really the episode then breaks up as they have a lead. It turns out that the warehouse was owned by a particular company, a particular, what do you call it? What do you call it? People who buy and sell houses? I can't remember, something assistants. I can't remember their names, but anyway, they've basically tracked the warehouse where they found the body to this guy, and Jack has decided that Owen will go undercover because when Jack and Toshika went to the warehouse, that means there could be video footage and they could have been spotted. Gwen and Yanto, I can't remember when they were seen during like one of the chases and stuff. They were chasing the Weevils, and the Weevil capturers saw them whilst Owen basically skipped work and to grieve because he's in pain and he's emotionally distraughted, and this puts us in a spiraling situation, which then leads into the second act. And Noel Clarke has done a great job here at the first half. We're setting up our characters to where they want to go and where they want to be, and all that. The second half really delves into two categories. The main category is the Owen plot. But before I want to talk about the Owen plot, I want to talk about the Gwen plot. Because Gwen has her own little storyline in which she's basically struggling to keep up with the whole, with her whole life. She doesn't really want to go home to Reese because she feels guilty for the fact that she's been having an affair with Owen. But she doesn't want to be with Owen because she doesn't love him. It's more of a fling, while she is doesn't know how to cope with the fact that she's keeping this massive secret from Reese. It also struggles with the fact that Reese and Gwen are kind of falling out. In fact, the story starts off is that Reese and Gwen are at a restaurant and they're cheering up and they're having a talk and discussion, but Gwen is clearly not listening. She's clearly zoning out as Reese gets a bit angry. And when Jack comes in with all scars on his body and it's like, sorry, Reese, you seem like a lovely lad, but we kind of need your girlfriend at the moment. I promise I bring her back. And Reese just flips his shit. He's like, no, you get back here. You sit right where you are and don't move. And Gwen is just like, you can't talk to me like that. As she goes off with Jack in the first scene. And that plot is really well handled-ish. And I'll explain why it's ish in a bit. But for the stuff I like, Gwen at this point has been easily the most relatable character of the Torchwood team. She's the only one really that has a life outside of Torchwood, and she's seen all of these horrible things, and we can understand why this would mean that, you know, she's kind of struggling with Reese, because it's like, how could you go back to a normal life when she knows that there are aliens, there are these monsters, these creatures, these horrible things out there, and Reese just wants to talk about like TV and laugh about his mates and stuff and all the stag do's and stuff, and so their relationship is basically falling apart, and we get a lot of scenes in which Gwen she comes home and Reese is like, I don't want to listen, I'm going out with a stag mate, I can't just stay here and wait for you. Like, this job is really becoming between us. We also get a scene in which Gwen's on a phone call and she's like, you're absolutely right. We need to talk about this. We need to sit down and discuss this and talk about us because, you know, I'm not in the right state of mind at the moment. And she says something that really is like triggers, because Reese is listening to it because she thought she was just doing a voice call, but in fact Reese is in the house listening, and Reese is about to pick up and is like, okay, we'll sort something out, before she states that she won't be home tonight, she's got to stay in for work. And then that's like, ooh, shouldn't have said that, like, because Reese feels like this work is clearly the thing that's getting between them. And this all then culminates really into kind of the finale of this storyline in this story, which actually takes place around about like halfway of the second act, which is so bizarre, in which Gwen sits down with Reese and tells him about her affair with Owen. And Reese is just like shocked. First of all, he thinks it's a joke, and he's like, you wouldn't do this to me. And Gwen is like, I did. And I said, why would you tell me this now? Because I feel guilty and we need to talk about it. We need to get out of the air. And also because I've drugged you. And it turns out that that Gwen has put in retcon in his drink so that he will forget the next day, but she begs for him to forgive her as Reese is like, you little and is angry annoyed and just won't give her the words that she needs. He is absolutely annoyed. He is not forgiven her. And this freaks Gwen out. Whilst Reese is fallen asleep from the sedatives, Gwen is literally grabbing his head like, say that you forgive me! Say that you forgive me! And the acting here is really powerful stuff. And the emotional hook is also incredibly powerful. I think it's a shame then that this plotline was completely wasted in this adventure. Before I delve into why that is, really this storyline then culminates with Gwen basically ordering pizza, going back to the tortured hub to like try and like communicate with her friends. It's just like, because now her only real friends that can understand her are the people in the Torchwood hub, like Jack, Owen, Yanto, and even Owen as well. And so she comes to them, but they are, they're out doing their own business, and so she sits down and she's eating the pizza by herself, and she starts crying. And again, the emotional hook is there. It's just the way this plotline is shoved into this adventure. I do not blame Noel Clarke for this. This is something which was clearly like a mandate. It's like, right, Noel Clarke, we've got this plotline for you. We want Owen to blah, 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 and we want this. But we also want this little thing with Gwen having her emotional struggles with Reese, and any writer would have struggled with that. And it's clearly here that Gwen was like, her plotline in this was like not a second thought, but you can see where the prominence of the storyline is, as Gwen's plotline never ties in to the Owen plotline with the Weevils, which is the main plot of the narrative. It feels like, in terms of just this story on its own, that this plotline's only there to set up future events, and it becomes extremely distracting because it's so clearly there for the emotional hook without any lead-ins to the story, to the narrative of this adventure. It's like, right, we're going through this plotline with Owen going through his emotional struggles. We then have Jack and Toshika's subplot in which they're trying to track down more of the Weevils and stuff, and is trying to track them all down and help Owen with his thing. And then you've got Gwen, who's kind of doing her own thing. That's like the concentration is completely on the other side of the room. That it really is, it's completely wasted in this adventure. It's stuff that I like, and it should have been in its own story. It should have been something which could be allowed to breathe and have a narrative around it in which we can tackle and deal with these personal struggles, or at least give it a lot more focus and prominence. But because it's in this story, in this plotline, that Gwen stuff feels completely wasted. Not that there's nothing bad here, not that their plotline doesn't go anywhere, but in terms of this story, and I'm going to use a word which is very controversial because a lot of people misuse the term, the Gwen scenes in this story are filler. They are simply there to bring time so that we can, when we cut back to the Owen stuff and the more interesting stuff, then we can, kick off where we left off. And that is such an annoying issue to notice, because it's like every time I'm really getting into this story, and then stuff which I would have been interested in, stuff that I would have been heavily invested in, because I love Gwen, I love Reese, I love the issues that are being tackled in the story. It's just that it has nothing to do with the actual story we're telling. and it's distracting as hell. And every time these scenes come on, I'm just like, right, you just stopped the story for to show us another episode. Do you see what I'm on about? See what I mean? I'm probably overthinking it. I know a lot of people love this story, so they might take heavily prominence of like me stating that. Like I said, it is good stuff, but it's filler in the context of this story. But so you might think, right, because of that, Adam hates this story or doesn't like it or at least think it's weak. But no, the second half with Owen is phenomenal. But there is a slight issue in that it's a complete and utter rip-off of the movie Fight Club. And I'm not the only one to point this out. This is something like it's basically, this story is commonly like not parodied, but referred to as the Torchwood Fight Club episode. Essentially, Owen has gone undercover as the salesman who's trying to buy some property, trying to push this guy, befriending him. Well, not really befriending him. The Torchwood team really just want to find information about the warehouse, and slowly they realise that he's lying, so it's like trying to get in as much information. But Owen and this guy seem to have a understanding. They have this mindset that, you know, the world's just horrible. Rich people only get what they want because, you know, they're greedy and mean bastards, and we leave just people like kicking in the dirt. And what's really interesting is that Owen, for a small part of the story, for a small part of the segment of this story, he is pretending to be this salesman. However, this storyline not only kind of ties in with him as this character, but Owen as a person as well, as, you know, he is struggling with all of these emotional baggage, and this guy then offers him out for a drink. Also, that guy, the guy they cast for this story, he is so clearly a villain. Like, he has the shit-eating grin. He's so clearly smug and thing. And on one part, it is too cheesy. It is over the top. It is silly. But on the other hand, this character is such, like, he only really becomes prominent in the second act. And the story does really need you to, like, get to know him quickly so that we can understand Owen's point of view. So having this cliched personality so that we can focus more on Owen. That I can understand through a plot synopsis why this character is the way that he is. But anyway, he seemingly falls for the Torchwood disguise of Owen being this salesman, and they have a drink and they have this discussion about how the world's really just unfair, and how you get what you want by taking it off people who do have it, and all this. Earlier on in the episode, Owen is in a bar having drinks, and this guy, seeing that this girl is flirting with him, has a fight, and Owen kicks his ass because, you know, he's the badass of the crew. And these characters then return in this scene where then Owen, with the help of the salesman, they beat up these people. But Owen then basically clearly reveals that he has a lot of anger because he beats this guy to the table and just keeps constantly kicking him. Now, Andy Goddard is a phenomenal director. In this story, he brings a lot of that grounded personality that he did in Countryside, which made that story so good. And here it's so good as well, from the lighting, from the warehouse when Jack and Toshika are there, to the later on episode parts of the scene where we get to the Fight Club segments. There's this grounded sense with the whole story. It's much more normal than your average episodes of Torchwood, and it's stylized in a grounded way, if that makes any sense. But I do have a little issue here, because I feel like that with Torchwood being, like 18, I think we should have seen Owen's actually kicking the person. Like, the shot is framed from like his waist up. I think we should have got at least a shot of Owen's, like the bloody like husk of the on the state that he left, just to bring out that point, to bring out that that emotional baggage. And this character clearly sees that Owen has a lot of this struggle, a lot of pain, and so he takes it to his house, where there seems to be hardly anything in his apartment, and they discuss about fame, and his character's like, this fame, it's, we've got all this money, we've got all of this, we can basically have whatever we want, we've got like all the power we need, but it means nothing. I could literally get rid of this all by tomorrow, and it doesn't change me, because it's not who I am, it's not the real me, it's not the thing that gets me hooked on life, on the emotions of reality. And obviously Owen is trying to disguise himself as the rich billionaire, but clearly he's not. So he doesn't, this kind of comes to a shock with him, and I like the bit where he's like he's kind of just trying to justify the fact that this person is rich. So he's kind of like, yeah, but it's still nice to have all these things, although, which I think, like later on, the guy describes like how he found out about him, but I feel like this would have been a great moment to have this character be like, you're not actually like rich, are you? This is like a disguise to get to me personally. And you could really feel the bondage between these two people. They have something in common, that that like life, just from their point of view, seems so arrogant. They're so arrogant. They're so pompous, but they feel like the world basically owes them in a sense, and that nobody else can understand how gritty and how real the world can be. And how like other people kind of live in a fantasy and all that. And so Owen snoops around his house because he's working for Torchwood, but he still kind of relates to him. And then when he goes into a room that was locked, he finds a beaten up Weevil that is chained up to the ceiling. And it turns out that this person has basically been using the Weevils as a body bag. This guy is, I don't know if he's the leader, but they basically treat him like he's the leader of this organization who's capturing Weevils. And it turns out that he doesn't actually know what they are. Like, he knows that they've popped out, they've seen them around popping around, and he doesn't know what they are. He talks about how people in the organization have different theories, that they might be like humans evolved or mutated, or from the future, or maybe they're aliens. Obviously, not clearing on the fact that Owen is from Torchwood. And what's really interesting is that, like, this is the scene in which it's revealed that he's been caught out. Like, the guy puts the gun to Owen and is like, who are you really? You didn't fool anybody. Your entire chick is clearly a scam. Like that girl that I rang up, he clearly is an actual secretary. But I would have liked to have seen it so that the thing that made him realise is the fact that that like Owen seems to be like, right, I really do want all these nice things that I get, kind of thing. Like he's pretending to be rich. I would have liked it to be that, but that's beside the point. And so this guy kind of like is like, right, do you actually want to know the truth? Do you really want to keep to know my secrets, my plans? And And so he kind of lets him know about the organization as they go to like a secret location where there seems to be a weevil in a cage, and people are basically cheering and chanting as somebody then steps into the cage, and they basically have a contest in which like see how many people last the longest. The more minutes you stay in there, you win like 100 grand or something like that, or sometimes nothing or something, and people in this place just beat each other up. This is where the Fight Club elements are clearly an inspiration for this story, as you know that film deals with similar premises of a group that beats each other up because you know they feel like reality is askew and it's the only real, and violence is the only way to really feel like you're alive, kind of thing. And Owen is actually kind of disgusted at first, but he kind of understands, he kind of gets it. And probably one of the most famous scenes in the story, the guy puts a gun to Owen's head. It's like, you're not going to tell anybody about this. You're going to jump in the cage. And Owen's just like, put the gun down. Put the gun down, and then I'll get in the cage. And he just stands up to the guy, puts his so the gun's in his face, just stares him down. And the guy puts the gun down. I was like, good boy. And he runs up, takes his jacket off. It's like, how long has somebody been in this? Basically getting ready as everybody's chanting, cheering. He is basically gone, right, I've got nothing to left, I've got nothing to live for. I'm just sick of the world, I'm just tired of everything. But I need something to make me feel alive. So I'm getting in that cage. I'm going to put my life on the line just to feel a rush, just to get an adrenaline rush. And he goes into the cage. But first of all, nothing seems to happen. The weevil just seems to stare at him. Everybody seems to be quieting down. Owen clearly is terrified, but he kind of seems control of it as he smirks to himself. He nods to the other guy. And then he just closes his eyes and is like, come on, you can do it. Come on, do it. Basically, egging the weevil to attack him. Back at the Torchwood base, this is when Gwen was just eating her pizza. Clearly that plot line was there so that she can be in the Torchwood hub at this time. She's there whilst the phone, which Jack retrieved from the dead body, beeps, and it gives the address of the secret location. So she relays that to Jack and Tashika so that they will all then go to this place. They pick up Gwen on the way, they go to this place, and they basically raid the place as the weevil starts attacking Owen, and he's screaming, he's covered in blood, and Jack basically is like, stop it everybody, this all ends now, and injures the guards to try and get to Owen. Gwen tries to take care of Owen, but Owen just screams at her, get off me. This is something he wants to do, and that is clearly a messed up situation. It's there where we realise, okay, this wasn't part of the plan. This isn't Owen got the secret scam. This is him genuinely trying to get an adrenaline rush. And that guy that Owen had befriended gets into the cage with the weevil, and Jack lets the weevil just absolute murder him because their secret organisation has been revealed, and for him there's nothing left, and so he gets mauled down by the weevil. We get then a nice scene at the hospital in which Owen, it starts off kind of friendly where Owen's like, please, you shouldn't have, I really don't like grapes. And Jack is trying to be like, right, we saved your life, we helped you, and Owen is kind of distraughted by this. He says something like, when I was in that cage, for the first time in my entire life, I felt alive. And then you had to come in. Well, you always have to save the day, don't you? And Jack is just clearly annoyed by this. It's just like, I want you back in work by tomorrow. And our story ends with a kind of revelation, which I've been told. I've never seen the stories, but I've been told pays off in series 2, in which Owen goes to the Weevils' cages in the Torchwood base, and there seems to be a relationship there. The Weevils go up to the front of the cage to taunt him, but just with a snarl, the Weevils kind of go back and kind of cower from him as Owen smirks to himself, hinting at a kind of symbiotic relationship there, and that Owen has become a much more animalistic individual. And so that is Combat. Overall, everything to do with Owen is gold. Like, the plot line around him here is phenomenal. Like, it makes you really understand his character and pays off character traits which was not like left in the previous story, but was there that was able to be picked up in the story in the previous episode, Out of Time. Which means, like, you get 2 back-to-back great episodes. I do like the stuff with Gwen in it, but I felt like placing those elements here, having those scenes in this story, made those scenes redundant, and made her plotline a filler for this storyline, and deserved to be much more prominent in its own story, in which those kind of emotional storylines can be tackled, if that makes any sense. I don't know, I'm probably overthinking this, but Combat, really great story, highly recommended. I do recommend, however, that you watch Out of Time first. This isn't a story you can't just jump in. You've got to have the context for Out of Time first before you can delve into this. So be mindful of that. And yeah, so Combat, highly recommended by me. So join me next time where we go back to the novels as the Doctor and Martha meet one of the greatest writers of all time and get reunited with a familiar foe. So join me next time for Revenge of the Jadoon, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!